Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Inevitable Instructors. So today we have a new voice who's been in a couple past presentations, but now we get to hear a lot of him. So today's topic is beginning raid heals for priests, and so this is sort of part of a healing series we're going to be talking about in just a little bit. So thank you all for watching, and I will turn it over to Kay to talk a little bit about our new way of doing things.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you to Z, who is Timothy Harvey, and what he's going to be doing is the Z Institute of Heals. So basically, we're going to start with a two-part series, and this is the first one, and it is all about if you just hit 90, and you've been playing on your priest or you've been playing on your pally, and you'd just like to go and start healing in raids. That's what we brought Z in for. Z has been raid healing forever, and I hope he tells us a little bit more about it before he starts, but we're going to turn it over to him now.
Hi, I'm Z. Essentially, I've been playing since Burning Crusades, and I'm pretty familiar with I have all the healer classes, so I am not afraid to go in and try healing the new LFRs or anything.
So actually, while we're doing that, really the quick thing about priests is that there are 3 different specializations: Holy, Discipline, and Shadow. Holy and Discipline are the healing ones, because I know this because I can talk about this now. So as a tank, I can say there's 3 different specializations. Shadow really doesn't help the tank a whole lot, but no. We'll talk a little bit about how Shadow Priests can help out, but the 2 main healing disciplines are Holy and Discipline. So I'll turn that over to Z to talk about his Holy.
Yeah, if you're doing Holy, you want to do your chakras. There is a Chastise, which is for damage. Generally wouldn't be using that unless probably you're essentially out doing quests or something like that. Serenity is a single target heal chakra that is going to intensify your single target heals. Okay, and Sanctuary is the one that 9 times out of 10 I see most priests using, because it's an increased AoE healing, and there's a lot of AoE damage that happens nowadays, and you can still be doing individual target healing as well. I don't like to specify any specific healer on specifically a tank. I like to be able to have us float as, there's a general rule that you may have someone assigned to heal, that you're assigned to heal, but always be aware of the rest of the raid, because it makes the whole team go a lot better if you're keeping everybody alive through the whole encounter. So but Sanctuary is the one I personally like to use when I do go Holy. So any other questions on that? Okay. Stat priority. Level 1 to 90, of course, you focus on the intelligence and spirit. You're always going to have the intelligence on the gear, if it's towards a healing class. And then if you're doing Holy, you want to be focusing on the haste, crit, then mastery. As I was saying earlier, without any direction, now that I'm looking at a slideshow here, the haste is going to increase the procs that you get from your renews and things such as that are hots, heals over time. Crits are going to increase the strength that you have of your healing in that class. And the mastery for Holy, I believe that's just going to make your healing that much stronger as a whole. Like I said, it's not my primary classification there. Okay. Next one, Discipline. This one is very much, there's 2 different ways you can go in this. Okay. The major thing is with Discipline is its absorption. Literally, their heals don't always show up the best on the healing charts, because a lot of what they do is absorption. It's not a lot of healing. It actually gives them shields, divine ages, etc., things like that, so that you can reduce the damage that the tanks or the raid members are getting. You can also do that through Smite and Atonement, but I will go into that later because I think that's on a later slide. Essentially, it's just a lot of absorption, and you can go into again with the stats on this one, you can go crit, mastery, spirit, crit, mastery. I'm right now trying more of a spirit mastery hit. You can open the door. And then to see how that does, because the more your mastery is, the more absorbs you're going to get out of it. So essentially, that's the largest part of it right there. It is all absorption.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about what do we mean when we talk about smoothing out the incoming damage, and like when they should shield and when they should heal versus shielding versus healing? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, basically it's along the lines. As I was saying earlier, knowing when the damage is going to be coming in during the raid is very critical for this. Knowing when the group is going to take a lot of damage. Like I used the dogs as an example earlier, dealing with the overloads or whatever. That's a perfect time that I would, on my priests, usually use Spirit Shell and Prayer of Healing and things along those lines, so that I'm hitting multiple targets, so that they are getting a shielding effect. There's a little bit of healing there. They're getting a shielding effect, but then there's a secondary effect from the passive effect of Divine Ages, which also creates shielding on the group as well. And basically, what it does is sort of extends their life, so that it comes from that shield first, as opposed to taking from their life pool. Did I answer that correctly, Chris, there?
Well, you answered it. I don't know if it's correctly or not, but yeah, It makes sense to me.
Okay.
So basically, when you think you're seeing a big incoming spike of damage because you know the fight well enough as a healer.
Yes.
You know you're anticipating a bunch of damage coming in. You know right before that you want to go ahead and pop the shield on somebody to help reduce that.
Exactly. And there's situations where, like, if we're up against Fang or something and the tank has a couple stacks, you could also pop Power Word Shield on them, because the more stacks they have, the more damage they're going to take as well. So, along those lines.
Okay, and does the shield absorb magic damage, or is it just physical damage? Or
It absorbs It absorbs all damage.
Okay, cool. So can you tell us about the stats priority for the Discipline Priest?
Sure. I think I already touched on that, but that's okay. Intelligence and Spirit. Mr. Rope, there's many different ways you can go about it. You can look for a crit build, Mastery, then Haste. I'm actually, like I said, I'm trying a Spirit Mastery build right now, because I'm focusing on the stronger absorptions with the Mastery is what that's going to give. The crit just makes it so that your shields are stronger as well. So it's a catch-22 there, honestly. It just depends on which one you can get up higher is what I think. But again, Spirit is your primary stat. I would recommend probably, at least from what I've seen from most of the healing that we do, I would recommend a minimum of Spirit of around 8,000, so that you could have a decent mana regeneration and everything along those lines.
Okay, and actually we had a comment in our guild from Hemotao, who's our other priest, and he was saying that one thing to note is that shielding and mitigation for disc is, by and large, it's faster to shield because the heals can tend to be somewhat slow.
Yes, that is very true. Very true.
And I just wanted to pull this up, and if Chris and Z and anybody else who wants to comment on this, because Z, a couple times you've mentioned Mr. Robot. So between you and Chris, could you explain exactly what is this Mr. Robot that you keep?
I'm going to defer this one to Chris, because I usually have somebody else look at Mr. Robot for me.
Ah, I see. So the truth comes out. Yes. No, actually, AskMrRobot.com is a site that's out there. It's one of those sites that's out there that really sort of is built to help you with the game. What you can see here on the screen is that really what it allows you to do is you go to AskMrRobot.com, you click on Optimize Your Character, and then it'll open up and it'll ask you what server you're on, what character you want to look up. And once you click that in, what we have here is a generic piece. So we want to protect the guilty, those that haven't enchanted or gemmed or are not completely where they're supposed to be. But basically, the generic gives you a good idea of what it looks like. So one of the things you can look at is there's a lot of different things you can do in Astro. It's sort of a build in its own. Like on the top, you have edit weights and you have options. So if you click on edit weights, this is where you can actually play around a little bit. Because if you look down here at the bottom, you can sort of pick: do you want to have, do you want to have a static cap? Do you want to have an effective spirit cap? How do you want to? You can change your soft cap if you need to. And again, so it has a lot of basic functionality to help those that are brand new to the game, but it also has some nice functionalities that if you're really an expert user when it comes to this, that you can go ahead and do it. And as you can see here, it's on World of Warcraft. You click on Gear Optimizer. And then what it'll do is it'll take a little bit to load. And then basically this is where you load your character at. So you pick it, Sisters of the Loon, you add your character name into it. Z or Hemotao, you guys okay if we look at your character?
Please pull me up. That's fine. Pull up my priest.
Yeah, that's fine. You'll see that I'm short a couple of...
Okay, well that'll help us out. So we'll look up Hemotao, and we'll go ahead and look at what he's there, because that'll give you a show. Because we don't want someone who's always optimized, so that's why we're not going to look up Z's character, because he's always optimized and where he's supposed to be.
Actually, it's not now, because I got some new pieces, so that's
cool.
That's right. That's exactly where I am. I have a new belt dropped for me last night. I haven't slapped a new belt buckle on it, and then I'm waiting to upgrade either my helm or my shoulders, but the meta gem or the shoulder enchant are very expensive.
That's what they have for. So send Cheerwine an email.
Okay, great.
So
well, I'm not sure I want to spend use the resource if I'm on the verge of upgrading.
Oh, that's okay. So what you do is on the screen here, you'll see that it says load, save, update across the top. It has Hemotao's name in a great big huge letter. Right below the name, the title of the tune, you see down below it says PvE haste build. So if we click on the down arrow, you'll see that it gives you a couple different things. So there's a haste build, there's a default build, which is more spirit crit, haste, mastery. There's a mastery build here as well. There's also a PvP build. So there's a lot of different things that you can choose from here. So if you read the descriptions, you pick which one you want. So Hemotao, do you know what build are you going after? What's your secondary stat? Is it haste, crit, or mastery?
So this is a little bit of advanced work, but really based on some feedback from Melodious. I used to be prioritizing haste.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually in a place right now where I'm in between their suggested builds, and I'm trying to balance haste and crit. So you can look under haste, and
sure.
What it'll suggest is that a gem or two might be not what they suggest, because I may have thrown a crit gem in instead of a haste gem.
Oh, that'll be fine. So then once you set the build, what you do next is now the other thing nice thing about Mr. Robot is all you have to do is you don't have to log out of the game. You just log off that tune, and then basically within a couple seconds this will update once you hit the update. So if you scroll up a little bit, you'll see that there's an update button next just to the left of the name. And if you click on that, it'll automatically update your character then. So it's a really fast update. And then what you do, you should be able to see the new gear that you have on there. And then what you do is once you have your gear, you click Optimize. And then Optimize will show you. So everything that has sort of a little green highlight behind it is things that it's suggesting for you to do. So for instance, for the build it has, on this one here, it's saying for the main hand weapon, it's saying take mastery and move it to spirit. It's saying for the waist, move haste into spirit. So it gives you a lot of these suggestions, and so we definitely recommend this for those that are new to raiding, those that are new to this area. Go with some of the basic builds. Obviously, just as we've been talking here, together, talk with your guildies, talk with those that are healing, and they can give you some insight on what you want to do with it, and then start tinkering around with it. Because remember, you can play around with the editing of the weights. There's different things that are around there. So there's lots of good things where you can go ahead and play with a lot of different ones. And as you can see, if we change a different set, obviously the optimization is going to be different. And so the other cool thing is all the way over on the right, you'll see it shows you what happens whenever you're optimized. It shows you what your bonuses will be. So in this case, if you did everything here, you'd have 419 more intellect, you'd have 1,300 more spirit. So it gives you all this this look at. And so this is that data. We always, in some of our other presentations, we've talked about the metadata, we talked about the statistics, the math behind World of Warcraft. Well, this gets into that. This is where a lot of that is, because really what Ask Mr. Robot does is it does a really good job of demonstrating the theory craft behind the game and making it accessible for a lot of the new players. And if you're a more experienced player, then you start tinkering around with this and setting your own weights and setting other things up. So now I guess we can go back to the slides. So can you guys talk a little bit about crit versus mastery?
Sure. Let's see. The crit is going to. It does extra damage from your crit. That would be more of. Wouldn't you agree, Hemo? That's more towards the Smite and Atonement.
It is, but a crit will
also make your shield stronger as well.
That's right. More likely to proc your passive shielding. Let me.
Divine Ages, the passive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what you get is a free shield, and so which is really terrific, and it it applies to the character that you're casting on, or you're healing. If you happen to be doing an AOE heal, like a prayer of healing, and you crit, it's terrific because you get 5 absorption shields for free. And I don't know if they're quite as strong as Power World Shield, but they are pretty strong.
I just cast one right now, and it's the Divine Aegis is at 52,762 absorption.
And I think my Power Word Shield is around 75,000, so a little weaker.
No, that was Divine Aegis I was talking about.
Right.
From a prayer of healing. My Power Word is 79,992. So, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so basically with the crit, you get your free healing, you get free mana shield, a free shield without mana, and then with mastery, it's more of just sort of increasing the basic, how hard your heals hit for.
That's why I'm testing the mastery one, because I think the mastery may also increase the Divine Ages as well. I'm not positive on that yet. I haven't verified that, but I'm actually trying to check that out. So that's something I'm looking into. So.
Well, and my understanding on mastery is that some earlier patches, it was very advantageous to stack mastery. It really is secondary now, and you get much better benefit from either stacking, either haste or crit or some combination.
Okay. And so Atonement. So basically, we've talked a little bit about Atonement before. Could you talk a little bit about more what that is? So, I mean, the slide here sort of gives us a quick overview.
Atonement is when you're actually attacking an enemy. And what it does is by attacking the enemy, a secondary effect from that, when you're using the spells that are listed, which is usually start off with Holy Fire, Smite, and Penance, those will then transfer shielding onto players within range, within 40 yards. And that can also be Divine Ages that comes up as well with that. So it's a secondary way of adding a little damage, but at the same time, you're doing healing as a secondary objective a little bit as far as healing. And it could be primarily that way. If you need a little bit more of a DPS boost for your group or something like that at the same time as healing. Agreed, Doug?
Yeah, it's a very interesting mechanic. So I would say as a healer, it's completely counterintuitive. Because and what's a little challenging is your focus. So instead of focusing and watching the health meters of your only of your of the raid members, you need to sort of focusing on the boss and DPSing. It's probably easier if you're coming from a DPS to be thinking about it that way. And actually, it can be quite powerful. And so I'm always constantly experimenting to see if I can atonement heal through an encounter. And if I can, you're correct. It does help with the DPS. And the beauty of it too is that it's a smart heal, so it automatically goes to the players whose health is the lowest. So I don't actually have to make a choice like I do when I'm healing. And it's also quite mana efficient.
And it gives a secondary thing. You also know what the boss is casting when I was saying raid awareness, so that you know when you're going to have to be prepping for bigger group AoE heals and things along those lines too, if you have the boss on focus in that situation.
That's true, and you get more information than you get from Deadly Boss.
Exactly, yeah. So.
Okay, so I think you guys touched on it a little bit, but evangelism. You guys speak a little bit about what evangelism is and does?
That's going to increase your healing by 5% for each stack that you have, and you can build it up to 5 stacks, and that happens by using Smite and Atonement. So if you do a Holy Fire, that's 1 stack. You do a Smite, that's another one. If you do 3 more mites or 1 penance in there, then you should have a stack of evangelism, which is going to increase your healing by 25% more, which in a discipline spec that turns into more shielding for the raid and the group itself. So it also gives you a slight amount of mana recuperation as well, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so the next slide just talks about a little bit about Shadow. I can cover this really quickly. Really, Shadow's focus is on DPS. You really are required to maintain Shadow form to keep your DPS up. You do have some weak heals and shielding, but you can still use shielding and not drop your Shadow form. So, I mean, that's the thing about it. You can also help out a little bit with throwing out some of the halos, some of the cascades, things like that, especially your last talent at 90. So there's some different things you can go ahead and do, but you just have to watch out and communicate with the other healers for when they're doing. Because can you guys talk a little bit about can you talk about a little bit about the communication you do with our Shadow Priest, that whenever we're raiding with them, and sort of how the two of you sort of work it out?
Perfect example would be Genrock before they did the nerf on him. Even though they may have weaker heals, they can help in situations, for example, like the lightning storm or something. We would definitely be asking our Shadow Priest to be throwing out Holy Nova or Cascade on the group or something along those lines, just a little bit to help us out so that we can all get stacked and make it to the stack point, and then we start coordinating our healing cooldowns along those lines. So they can be very useful in that respect as well. As far as helping out with a little bit, it's not a huge number in HPS, but it definitely will help out in the appropriate circumstances if you know when to do it. So.
And I think we've really seen that in our guild. Lotus is our Shadow Priest who usually runs raids with us, and we've seen that not only has she been really cooperative with that kind of thing, but you and Melodious have even asked her at certain times to respec so that she could help with things, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And that goes into a whole other category as well, as far as each class knowing about their damage mitigation. We can go into that right there as far as knowing what they can do to help with reducing damage that they're going to be taking during big times of where there's a lot of healing that's going to happen. So that goes right along in tow with that, if you, in my opinion. So.
Okay, and so we have a little bit of discussion here, sort of things that we've worked together on, is that for Shadow Priest, for helping, basically the idea would be to, again, that communication is key. Always help out with Cascade, Holy Nova, and Divine Star for your last talent. So pick one that works best for the fight. Like I said, if it's a fight where everyone's stacking, obviously you can use the one, the straight line Divine Star. If it's spread out a little bit more, you'll need to look more about the Cascade and the other one,
And
Halo.
the thing with the Cascade, you have to be careful, though, because if you want it for healing, you have to make sure you target friendly members.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if you target the enemies, it's all going to go as to damage on the enemies that you're fighting as opposed.
Okay, cool.
So that's
It's also important as a shadow. I mean, you always have the option of dropping out of shadow, and you do have access to a little bit more limited set of healing spells. They're not as effective, and they're very mana intensive as shadow. But if a healer goes down, or the healers are having a really hard time keeping up, and you're about to lose the tank, sometimes for the good of the raid, it's always a good idea just to know that you have that option to drop out of shadow and heal.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the hallmarks of our group, is that we're very collaborative in nature, and so it's not about getting the highest DPS or whatever. It's more about going ahead and making sure that we're successful. And so I think, like I said, if you're in a guild like that, then that's definitely an option for you. Those watching might have different guilds, but this is what we're looking at here. The other thing about it is looking at the Hymn of Hope. And coordinating that with everybody. I think it's pretty obvious that you need to coordinate that, because if two of you hit at the same time, it's pretty much wasted. One of them's wasted. The other thing is hit mana regen during lull, knowing the fight, and basically looking at 7.75 seconds whenever you need to have 8 seconds. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, the Hymn of Hope, I absolutely want to. I usually, if I'm on a priest, or I like to let people know that I'm doing that, because that means essentially for almost 8 seconds I'm not going to be healing. So that means I'm going to, and now that with a new patch they've made it so that it goes primarily to healers, which is really, really nice, because before it didn't always do that. But it's important to communicate that to the other healers that you're using that, because that means they need to cover your healing a little bit while they're regaining mana, and you are, et cetera, along those lines, so that you don't have a tank drop or a DPS drop in that situation during those 8 seconds. I know it doesn't seem like a lot of time, but there's a lot that can happen in 8 seconons.
Forever, actually.
Yes, it is. And haste will actually decrease the time on that, if I remember correctly. Am I correct on that, Doug?
I think so. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yes, it does. It must. Yeah, absolutely it does.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so our next slide says mana is the most important attribute for priests. Because without it, what happens?
Which is a term which means you have no mana, which means you can't heal. Which means people die and you start over again.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that is spelled OOM, right?
OOM, yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
and if
out of
you're a
mana.
DPS or a tank and you see your healer typing OOM in chat, please do not pull.
That means stop.
That's right. It is synonymous with stop and wait.
Yeah, it's very important. I actually leave the raid bars up on my screen so that I can see where everybody else's mana is at, as far as healers and things like that. Even if I'm tanking or anything like that, I do that so that goes along with the raid awareness, knowing how your healer's mana is, that type of thing. Exactly like Doug was saying, don't pull if your healers don't have mana.
And that's a common problem whenever you get into, like, non-guild runs like LFR runs
Yes.
and
Yes.
dungeon runs where you have certain individuals who just try to run, and blow through it as fast as possible, but they don't necessarily respect the fact that they may be running with an undergeared healer, or they might be dealing with a group that is not necessarily used to going, because there is sort of this culture of it's okay to take some fights off in LFR because you want to save your mana for the big boss fights, and then you get too many people taking the fight off, and then we wipe for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So the next slide talks about what affects mana.
Like it says, intelligence is very much one of the biggest factors because it's going to make. Well, I think they've capped the mana.
No, they've capped. I mean, it matters to a point. So
to a point, yes, but I think intelligence is more towards spell power.
That's
now.
correct.
And
a little bit it helps with crit as well.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's true, because prior to Mist of Pandaria, actually no, prior to, when did they start capping it? In late Cataclysm, wasn't it?
Wasn't it Pandaria when they started capping it?
Yeah, it was MOP when they first started capping it. So now it used to be that intelligence determined the overall amount of mana you had. Then they decided to give everyone cap everybody on the amount of mana pool is. And so now what happens is once you reach that mana cap, really that's where intelligence helps out as far as the spell power and the crits.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that cap is 300,000.
Unless you're a monk.
Oh, well, we're talking about priests, though, aren't we?
Yes, we are. I was just putting in 2 cents.
I don't know about monks.
I was just putting in 2 cents. The monks have a higher mana cap.
I'm sure you, yeah.
It's
Speaking of which, that's a beautiful dance, yes.
Okay, and then the other thing is about the spirit. So we're talking about regen mana.
That's whether you're in combat or out of combat. The important one is when you're in combat. That's the one you can regenerate while you're in combat, getting mana back in the middle of a battle. Like an example, right now I'm sitting at, I'm a little low for my spirit, but I have some gems that I need. I'm at 7,689. I like to be closer to 8,000. But with the new timeless gear, a lot of that, they changed it over so that there wasn't spirit on a lot of that gear. So it's a catch-22. But my in-game combat regen is at 10,339 mana every 5 seconds while in combat. And I seem to do okay with the cooldowns that I use as far as Mindbender to help get back mana. I have 2 trinkets that give back mana, and I also have Arcane Torrent, which is a racial ability. So I try to coordinate those as to when I need those to get extra mana back, along with the Hymn of Hope.
Yeah, and I've got about 9,250 spirit that gives me actually 11,220 mana per 5 while in combat. In general, even for really long fights, I'm able to manage that with a couple of trinkets.
Exactly.
And just a couple of my abilities also give help regen mana. Actually, Power Word Solace, which I can use as an Atonement priest, helps. That replaces Holy Fire for other priests. And of course, the Shadow Word. The Shadow Fiend, which is what I'm spec'd into right now.
Okay. So speaking of in-combat regeneration, one obvious way would be to use a wand instead of casting, but that's not really effective. But talk a little bit about Mindbender.
That's the talent where you use it so it's an improved version of the Shadow Fiend. Like Doug was saying, he used Solace and Insanity to gain back mana. I personally, and it's a preference, whatever you like to use. I personally use the Mindbender because it's an improved Shadow Fiend that does more damage and is better at generating mana for you.
It also has a much faster cooldown.
It's like
1 minute versus 3.
1 minute, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I use it almost every chance I get to be popping that out to get back mana, and it does nicely. I will honestly say that. It's, for me, I can be almost at no mana, and then I'm at half mana easy. And then I pop a trinket and a few other things, and I'm sitting nice.
All right. So we talked about Mindbender as a talent. So the next couple of slides we're going to talk about suggested talents. So the first one's at level 15. And the suggestion one is Dominate Mind. So I have a feeling that the person who helped us out on this, they're more PvP oriented. But is Dominate Mind still the one you suggested in the first level talent, or do you suggest another one? Because I believe it's Dominate Mind, Void Tendrils, and Psyfiend. I think are the options you have.
Right, that's a very situational pick.
Yes.
I think in general, Void Tendrils is what I've spec'd into, and then I see many in the first tier. It is a root. So if you're just soloing, it's terrific because you can put some distance if they're melee. But even in the Immersius fight, for instance, in Siege of Orgrimmar, we found that Void Tendrils plays a super important role in the phase 2 of that fight by rooting the ads.
Oh, something I learned today on that one. You can also leap of faith the healing.
Oh, the healing ones.
The globules.
I was wondering about that.
Yes,
Oh.
you can absolutely leap of faith them back if you need some time more to heal one.
I believe Melodius also said you could void shift them.
Yes, that works beautifully, actually. Yeah. Yeah, that is correct.
Very cool. So you're saying Void Tendrils. I know that also Psyfiend. I know we recommended that for the Will of the Emperor at the end to help with the rages and who are attacking the healers. That people recommended Psyfiends to help sort of fear them, and we talked about stacking those up as a way to sort of keep the rages off of our Clothies during that fight.
I personally like the Psyfiend because of the fact that if something's coming at me and it's like a mob or something, and it's going to give the tank time to rally them, and it's only going to do random fleas on things which come within a certain direction. So I'll put that usually right by me or something like that as a healer.
And then the only thing to consider, and you can actually pick some other, maybe it's a Glyphs, to help with this. A feared mob could wander into another pack of mobs in certain situations.
It's definitely situational. Agreed. It's knowing what you're up against and what's around in the area. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So either a fear or a Psyfiend can be a terrific way to get a mob off of you. But it will definitely come back once it's through being feared, and it might bring friends. The other thing to do is to hit a fade, which is our threat clearance ability, and
Sadly,
it removes all threat for 10 seconds.
As I would like.
No, basically all it does is going to pick somebody else in the raid to go after instead of you. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so next talent, this talent was Angelic Feather. So this is your level 30 talents. Do you guys have another suggestion? The reason why for that one was it was allows you to put the reason why this person chose it was because it basically gives them the ability to pick and choose where they get their speed bonuses. Because really that second tier is more about giving increased movement speed.
Yes. I've seen a lot of people use the Angelic Feathers. That's fine too, because you can place it knowing when someone's going to need a speed increase or something like that. For me, this is just my personal preference. I use the Body and Soul because if I'm using shields anyway, then it's going to... If I want to shield somebody, I know that they're going to get a movement speed of increased by 60% for 4 seconds automatically. So that's just my preference on that one. Again, that's just a preferential thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And and I'd say that's the same thing. I think Angelic Feather, you actually situations where more people in the raid could benefit. from faster speeds. For me personally, usually in a raid situation, it's just another button, another talent that I have to click on.
Exactly. That is.
Call
me a lazy healer.
Yeah, when things are really going fast and furious, it's comforting to know that a shield is going to speed somebody up, and that if I need a speed boost, I don't have to go and hit another talent and then place it on the playing field.
Exactly, I agree with you.
Right? Because you have to target somewhere in the field, and just we were saying 8 seconds was long. It just feels really long.
Okay, so level 45. Sorry, I talked about a Mindbender, and that in general is pretty much your guys' recommendation for that talent as well.
It can be Solus like Doug uses as well. It just depends. I mean, because I haven't messed with this. I just
yeah, and as a discipline, if I'm doing atonement healing, this is the advantage is that it actually is a pretty effective mana regeneration. Plus, I'm DPSing, which then creates healing for other people. So it's useful. But I've done Mindbender as well, and I think it's a terrific choice. It's just whatever you're comfortable with, really.
It's playstyle, really, is what it comes down to right there, I think, for that choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So next up, we have level 60 talents. The recommendation here is Desperate Prayer.
What do you use, Z?
I personally, let's see, let me look. Hold on, I'm switching. I use Spectral Guise.
Interesting. So I use Angelic Bulwark. And so I would say Desperate Prayer and Angelic Bulwark do very similar things, which is that gives you it sort of saves you if you are getting pretty low and you need to get a lot of health back because you stepped in something or you're getting hit. The difference for me is Desperate Prayer, you have to actively select the talent on your bar, and Angelic Bulwark procs automatically if you go below a certain level. And so it's just sort of an auto save for me, an auto heal if I get really low, which is just one less thing for me to worry about, which is why I use it.
Okay.
And if I'm getting hit by a bunch of ads, I know like we were saying, 8 seconds is a long time, but on the same note, if that's 3 less attacks I'm taking and it gives a tank time to take that because they're attacking an image of me, it's sort of the same concept where I'm not taking the damage.
Okay.
They're all sort of a self-save is what they are. Am I right on that, Doug?
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely their purpose, yeah.
Okay, on to level 75. Power Infusion is the recommendation here, but how about you guys?
I love Power Infusion.
Yeah, I agree on that.
It increases your haste. Like that's a perfect example where I will use that in conjunction if I know that there's going to be a bunch of raid healing that we need to do. I'll use that Power Infusion, Spirit Shell in conjunction with Prayer of Healing, and even my Life Bloom as well, which gives me some more haste on top of that. And that just means everybody's being shielded, and it makes your Prayer of Healing cast that much faster. So and it's not a long cooldown. 2 minutes is not very long to have to wait to use that on a regular basis.
And it also lasts 20 seconds as opposed to 10, which is the case for many other talents.
Yes.
It's definitely something that, by and large, you're going to use off cooldown, unless you know the fight and you know you're going to be coming to a tough section, in which case you would save it and then, actually, as he said, pop it.
Great for burst healing is what Doug's getting. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. All right, and so the last one is level 90, which would be recommended here is Cascade, but I'm sure you guys might have a different recommendation.
Again, that's a preference one. It depends on the situation. I personally use Cascade because I like it to be able to bounce from the raid members as much as possible. and it gives me the diversibility as if I want to be using it as a DPS as well. I think it works a little bit in the Atonement aspect too. I'm not positive on that. If you're doing Jin Rock, where you have to stack, Divine Star is beautiful. If everybody's in a group, that works great. If you're somebody like a Shadow Priest, then Halo might even be a better choice, because then you're not really targeting anything. You're just casting and it's going out in a big radius. So it's on your preference in the situation there, I think. So
the one thing I would note about this tier, it's important to notice, is the mana cost of these abilities. So I am spec'd into Cascade. I think it's important for me to remember if I'm Atonement healing and I'm targeting the boss or mobs versus the raid. So I just have to and occasionally I mess up and I end up targeting the wrong thing.
I've done the same.
Divine Star costs 13,500 mana. I know Melodious uses it, and so it's not that expensive. But Cascade is 27,000 mana. Halo is 40,500
It's
mana.
huge. That's
It
why
is
I avoid
huge.
that.
And so if you're having mana problems in your fight, these are not none of these really are things you're going to use on cooldown because they're too expensive, but particularly Cascade and then Halo. Halo is super expensive, so I would say it's a very situational because it can get you out of mana super fast. And if you need to use it because people are taking a lot of damage, odds are you're going to need that mana to keep healing people.
So you're saying it's a good one for Shadow Priest to use, but not necessarily for the healer ones?
That would be my preference.
I think that's right, because then as a Shadow it does damage and healing both.
And they
Just
get
depends
mana
on how
back so much faster than healers do as a general rule. Especially with their disbursement, which I believe gives them, for
a
6
lot.
seconds, a lot of mana regain.
A ton.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a little bit about types of healing, single target versus area of effect healing. Basically, I think they're pretty self-explanatory as far as what single target healing is, and versus what is AoE healing as well. So it's very similar to DPS. Really, you're looking and seeing. Again, you guys are probably going to say it's very, it's very specific to the given circumstance.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, that goes into right in line with communicating with your other healers as far as don't be afraid to say, I need help with the tank or something like that, or help with the raid a little bit. And it doesn't take a lot for someone to do that, to be able to help in those situations. As far as a healer, usually, communication is so vital in those situations that it can make or break a group on many different levels. So.
And I think we had one instance really of that when we were doing Jin Rock, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. A specific example when healers were getting targeted. We actually have a video. That if anybody is interested in watching that, it's a long video.
I can link it. I'll link it.
It's 51 minutes. However, but it shows you how we go through the discussion, analyzation, and everything on that. And literally, what we were running into problems with is when the healers were getting focused lightning. Now, we were good about having other healers cover the tanks if one of the tank healers had the focus lightning. The problem we were running into is in that situation, I was the raid healer. I would get so far behind on the raid healing that we would end up losing too many DPS because I couldn't recover from that. So the thing we had to adjust was making sure that whenever the other person got back, I'll just say Melodious as an example, she got back from the focus lightning. And then she said, okay, I'm on the tank. She didn't immediately go to the tank. She helped out with some AoE healing on the raid so that it gave me enough of a boost because I was covering the tank primarily to be able to sustain the raid, and they weren't at like, what was it? What were they running at for a while there? Literally a quarter of their life when I was
Yeah.
stuck on the tank, if I remember correctly.
Hmm.
It made that much of a difference as far as helping each other out. Like, it wasn't a one-way street. Like, I wasn't just helping with the tank. It was a two-way where when she came back, she was helping with the raid as well, and then went back to the tank. It was like a double coverage type thing. So.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So the next couple slides are going to be about useful spells. So we'll quickly go ahead. We'll probably pick up a little bit of speed here. Saying, okay, so the useful spells on this slide are Power Word, Fortitude, Hymn of Hope, and Fear Ward. So you talk about when do you use when you decide to use those ones?
Power Word, Fort, always.
And as a tank, I can say yes, always. I wish it stack, in fact.
That helps the whole group. More life means they don't die as quickly. Fear Ward, situational. I'm skipping to that because I think we've pretty much touched on the Hymn of Hope. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, we've talked about Hymn of Hope a little bit before.
Okay. The Fear Ward, knowing when somebody's going to be feared or when it's going to happen, that will give them an immunity to it once while you can cast it. And again, that's very situational. Knowing as to when to use it along those lines. So.
Okay.
And I would note it only protects them for 3 minutes. So you really do need to.
It's knowing the
just
fight.
not set it and forget it. You need to know the fight and when it might
Exactly.
Be needed.
Very good point. Very good point with that. So the next ones up are Purify, Dispel, and Silence.
Dispel is very beneficial when you're in different situations as far as whether it be mass dispel or single target dispel. Essentially, mass dispel and purify are the same concept, except one is single target and the other one affects up to 10 raid members. And it's good for getting rid of debuffs that people have. I think Doug would agree 100% on caution on the mass dispel. Huge mana consumption there.
Yeah, 39,000.
Yeah, exactly. But there are times when it makes a difference. It really does. Again, that's if you have a bunch of people in the group who have it. It's going to be more effective for you to cast that once than going to do Purify and waiting for an 8-second cast to get 3 other people, if you do the math on that. You know what I mean?
Well, exactly, and that's really the cool thing about this discussion is because this is really the math and the optimization science that's coming into it. It's saying you only have a budget of $300K to work with.
Yes.
And so you have to definitely stay within your means. And so it's really a fascinating discussion to see how you guys are talking about, okay, well, here's the cost of this one. I like to go switch off and do this one instead.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and sometimes you do need to. I mean, it's important to know if the debuff is really damaging, or or if we can sort of heal through it. And when you're running low on mana, I have to admit that I make choices about who gets dispelled. So if an LFR, it's folks in our guild. Typically, it's almost always going to be the tank and other healers too.
Agreed. Prioritize.
And you just have to know the fight and know where your mana is. But these are all decisions you're making in real time.
This is not directed at anybody, but like in an LFR, if I have somebody who is constantly standing in something, they're less
You're
likely
giving away
to...
the healer's secrets here.
If they have a debuff, I am less likely to be wasting mana on that person. Right, Doug?
Yeah.
And I'm just piping in as somebody who calls some of the raid fights is you make your decisions. Sometimes you talk with your healer about who gets priority when it comes to healing.
That's a very important thing right there. in the raid situations, communicating to other healers when you're dispelling to let them know who you're dispelling. That way you're not wasting a button click, because we were talking about time wasted having to hit another button can be very, very useful in that situation as well for all your healers.
And for calling a fight, I sometimes do, and Z knows this, have conversations about what priority heals are, because if we're going to make it through 75% of the fight, and we might end up losing one or two people, you know, who are the one or two people that we could most afford to lose and still down the boss.
I do want to touch on one spell that I think is really great, since we have somebody here. It's a perfect example that it would work on right now. If you have somebody who is a high DPS person, who's really good at getting aggro, in the case of a priest, I'm going to say jabber, okay? Pain suppression is a beautiful thing, even though it's a 3-minute cooldown. But it's going to, what's it do? It reduces threat by 5% and reduces all the damage they take for 40 seconds for 8 seconds. That's like another one of those situational save buttons. It is a great example to use that on somebody. Rebecca's another one, or Jacori. Those type of high DPS people, if they're starting to get some aggro, and I don't use any of the mods, but I just look for the little red lines around the raid screen and everything like that, and those will be when I use that. And again, you have to be careful, because it is a 3-minute cooldown, which is a little bit longer. So, but
And I'll use that on a tank too if I'm falling behind and I'm worried I'm going to lose the tank.
yes, as a last resort, I have done that on a tank as well. The catch-22 is it reduces their threat by 5% usually, but if you're far enough into the fight, it's not that big of a deal. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would never use it. I would never use it on pull.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
potentially asking for trouble.
And as a tank, I would agree that once you established it, you know, especially once you get in a couple minutes into the fight, they're always coming back to the tank. The biggest thing, the only thing you have to watch out for is whenever the tanks are swapping taunts, because that's something else that you run into. But in that case, it sort of mitigates the damage coming in anyways.
I have used that in a situation where I hear a tank say, I'm trying to taunt.
Yeah.
I will use that on you in that situation, Chris, sometimes. By dropping your threat, which means she's switching it because you don't want the stacks to go too high on you.
Exactly, yep.
Again, that's situational, and it can be helped in that fashion too. So it's really paying attention to what's going on in the fight there with that one.
Well, exactly, and that's, again, these are the conversations that are always going on, and the next thing, that's fine. I'm totally fine with losing some threat, because as a tank, you always get it back. It's not a big deal. It's just typically just don't do it just after I taunted.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, guys, I've talked a little bit about this one, so you probably won't spend a lot of time on it. Mass Dispel. Basically, it's capped at 10 friendly and 10 enemy. Basically, you have an area of effect of the caster. So I guess my question for you guys is, what should the rest of us be doing when you're trying to Mass Dispel?
Stacking is
Stay close together. Yeah.
I was waiting for you guys to go, duh. I was waiting for that.
Spread
stacking,
out, yeah.
If you want to make it harder on us, spread out the wins. There you go, and then you're going to hear us complain.
With a little, you guys almost had that Charlie Sheen winning, attitude there for stacking, so. So that was cool. But actually, a friend of mine, she described healing as being the micromanager of the entire team, because she's constantly looking and watching everyone's health go up and down, and deciding who lives and who dies. So it's kind of fun.
It is a very different. So our focus is not. I mean, it's sort of it's divided, right? It's on the boss and on the floor and where we're standing. But man, we have to watch those health bars. So it's almost a different game in some respects than if you're DPS or tank.
I know the few times I've gone on a healer, which I'm sure it's going to end up being more especially once we start talking about pally healing, is that it just reminds me of, look, it's Excel graphs, yay! Yeah, I like real time data feed, yay! So next up is Psychic Scream, Shackle Undead, and Fade.
Well, we're pretty much. Doug already talked about Fade, pretty much. I think he mentioned how that reduces the threat. Psychic Scream, I will use that. Again, it's situational, and I have to know what's around me, and know that I will use it in situations if I'm specifically getting attacked and all my other things are down, and I know that they're not going to pull other things that are going to cause us to wipe. It's again, that goes into the knowing where you're at, what's going on in the raid. I know a lot of people really don't like that, but I honestly will say it's saved my character quite a few times. So, and then I can say, "Get it off me! Get it off me!"
Communication is key.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Shackle, do you do that a whole lot, or is that just sort of a talent you just sort of leave off your bar?
I actually have it on my bar, but I haven't seen much use for it in quite some time, actually.
Yeah, I think it was really useful during the whole Lich King Undead phase, and now it's sort of disappeared quite a bit.
I'm sure
it's our version of the sheep or the
Yeah. I'm sure they'll have situations where it comes back. So.
All right, now Leap of Faith.
It's great. However, and they even made it so you can do it from any direction now with a new patch, which is really nice. We were talking about if you have somebody who's standing in something and just won't get out of it. The catch is sometimes the person who you leap of faith may end up running off in the wrong direction because they're not sure what happened.
Yeah, I will say it does change it. So that's one thing about leap of faithing. It's kind of interesting where it's at. So it looks like Hematao's lining up another one.
I'm still on cooldown. It is one of the very few talents in the game where we actually can control another character, in the middle of a fight. And so if you're not communicating, boy oh boy. I mean, but yeah, it's it can definitely pull somebody to safety. If they're standing and stuff, or trying to pull somebody far away and not pull other mobs.
Yeah, we use it a bit in Throne of Thunder for the ramps there, with the moving the different big spirits through, bringing them down on top of us. So the ones that give the reduced healing debuff, right between Horadon and Jinrock and Horadon. I know we've used Leap of Faith there quite a few times, and there's been some close calls. I remember getting Leap of Faith just to the edge.
I will sometimes use that for a tank too who's really, really low if I don't have my other things, just to buy them some time so that I can get them healed up again. Because usually once they have aggro, like we established already, that means they're going to come back. But if you can leap of faith somebody, you're talking a decent amount of distance there, 40 yards, where they're not being attacked right off when the enemies are running towards them.
Yeah, that gives you a lot of time. The other time I saw Leap of Faith used a lot is and for raid purposes, not just to have fun. Because there's plenty of times where everyone will be running to the exit or everyone will be running to an area.
Oh, yeah.
And the priest is following behind, so they feel lonely, so they Leap of Faith someone back to them. So that way they're not the only ones that are there. But actually, LFR seems to be a really good use of Leap of Faith because you have so many people who just ignore the AoE damage that you can yank them out of stuff. And then also, I actually saw a chained Leap of Faith to a bad player in Dragon Soul, basically where they kept going. They didn't like the person, so what they did is a bunch of healers got together and they basically Leap of Faith them off the top of Wyrmrest Temple.
Oh, wow.
And so they had him yanked by like 3 or 4 different priests, and then they finally got him off.
Dang, that's some coordination right there.
So Leap of Faith is kind of fun for everyone, except for the person being jumped. So the last spell we're going to talk about here, because it's not quite a healing spell, but Vampiric Embrace for those shadow priests out there. It does give a 50% healing. You heals you and your allies for 50% of the damage you do for 15 seconds. So I don't know if you guys play Shadow Spec at all, but do you guys use that a lot, or?
It's been so long since I've played Shadow, I can't help on that one.
It really does not offer a tremendous amount. So it's useful. I mean, and there are times if you're doing Shadow and coordinating with the other healers, particularly through a heavy raid-wide hit. If it's used in that time, it can be, most helpful and just help top off the heal. But it's modest, but helpful. Every bit of healing is helpful.
Okay, cool. So next up is, I guess the next couple slides we're talking about sort of, well, why would you choose Discipline, and then we follow that up with why would you choose Holy. So first off, we talked about why Discipline. And we talked about shielding, absorption. We talked about healing automatically by dealing damage. So really, Discipline is much more of the caster DPS, where you are also healing a % of the damage to the rest of the AoE, healing a % of that damage to everyone else around you as far as the Atonement goes. But you also have the single target healing that's there. Really what it says is that Discipline is more versatile because you can heal single, raid, and contribute to DPS. And so you guys agree with that?
Pretty much. Well, even Holy can, depending on which chakra they're using. If they're using the damaging one, they can. Like I said, but I haven't messed around with that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I find also Discipline, I mean, just as soloing, and just grinding up rep and things like that. It's pretty effective. Just sort of questing and PvE outside of dungeons and raids, and also have some fun with it on PvP as well.
Okay. And then also go ahead.
A disc priest that is geared in PvP is not easy to kill. I will say that.
Yeah, we have a player. We have a guildie who loves to PvP in his disc priest. So, but he hasn't been on for a bit. So, but he likes doing that. So we have AoE for Cascade and Divine Star. Prayer of Mending is another reason why to go Discipline, and Prayer of Healing.
Well, Prayer of Mending also goes with Holy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And as is Prayer Healing.
Yeah.
Okay, so for why Holy, we have in a raid situation, no absorbs, but depending on which chakra, you can do individual healing plus 25% heals in raid. You have a stronger Renew, and you have Divine Hymn.
Divine Hymn is no joke. That is strong. It's like Tranquility, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
That will really crank out some heals when you need it. So.
Okay, then I have extra AoE healing, similar to a Druid. Light Springs.
Beautiful, because nobody ever clicked on the light wells.
Light well.
And now, of course, every time it comes out, I think it's a light well, and I go to click on it, it's a light spring. So it's kind of fun. So basically, what it is, we have another repeat of Divine Hymn, because Divine Hymn is so uber. So that sort of wraps that up. Now I'm going to talk about gear basics.
Though I do want to one Holy also if you die, Holy creates a Spirit of Redemption for like 15 seconds.
Yes,
so you actually get to heal with unlimited mana for 15 seconds, even after you're dead. Is a Holy, which can be incredibly powerful. As a disc, I'm just I watch the fight.
Yeah, so in Holy, even after you die, you're still put to work as a Holy Priest.
That's right.
So for gear basics, intellect comes with every piece, but you still do need to enchant for it because of the extra spell crit and spell power. Spirit, I know we talked about possibly having a minimum of 8,000 spirit before you start raiding. Does that sound about right for each of you?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, minimum. I mean, higher would be.
Yeah.
Preferable, yeah.
Higher's better.
This is just to get really sort of. You have to
I
be
wouldn't-
at least at 8,000 to start thinking about healing raids.
I wouldn't try before 8,000. Yes.
Okay. So basically, we have some gear base. We talked about this earlier, so I'm going to go through it really quick. So Mastery increases your absorbs. For a Disc Priest, Crit increases chance of spells and healing to hit and proc for Divine Aegis. You obviously do not worry about hit, or is that the case, or do you still need to worry about hit as a Disc Priest?
Not at all.
Not as all. In fact, you've got a special talent. So as an Atonement Priest, you do not have to worry about hit. You will automatically always hit as an Atonement Priest.
Okay, cool. You can crit build if you want. Critting more often makes stronger absorbs. And then for Holy, your focus is on haste, and Mastery is your secondary.
I believe that's what Mr. Robot says on that one, yeah. Like I said, it's not my primary one, so.
Okay, and then we have gems, and basically the word is spirit.
Yep.
You want spirit on every single one of your gems.
If possible.
So some example of gems would be red would be brilliant, purple would be purified, which is intellect and spirit, blue would be sparkling, which is sparkling or purified. They both give you spirit. Purified is obviously above. So for a red slot, you typically would do a brilliant. For a purple slot, you'd do a purified. For a blue slot, you'd do sparkling or purified, depending on what level your spirit is. About what level do you guys look at for spirit when you guys start looking at trying to focus on something other than spirit? Is it around like 9,000 or 10,000?
Oh, I'm not sure if I ever got to 10,000. So.
Okay.
I personally, if I've reached 10,000, and I have, but a lot of them have been switched over, like I mentioned with the timeless gear. Then I will start looking into something else, as far as whether it be a crit build, haste or mastery build. It just depends.
Okay. So there really is no spirit cap per se.
Yeah, because some of the procs on some of the trinkets I've seen my spirit go as high as 15,000.
Okay.
I think the important thing for spirit is it's the out of mana. If you are having mana problems in your fight, you need more spirit. If you're not, then you start dialing it back down and devoting some over to crit or haste. And it just depends on how your fights are going. And there are going to be fights that are just different and more demanding, and you're going to need to pump up the spirit for those. So I think what you do is you focus on spirit until you are comfortably getting through fights, and then you start to dial down to find the right level that works for you.
Okay.
I agree, and then mana management as well, knowing when to be casting things and when not to. When there's lulls in the healing, when you have a little bit of time that you can do lighter heals as opposed to bigger ones.
I mean, in general, I would say the goal is to have as little spirit as you need to get through the fights, because then you can devote the balance to crit or haste.
Okay. And then for the yellow socket, you're looking at mostly it's fractured for mastery, but you could also use an orange gem, which would be artful, which is intellect and mastery. You could also use a green gem in either the yellow or the blue slot, and that would typically be Zen, which is spirit and mastery. And typically your meta gem is going to be the revitalizing, which is the plus spirit meta gem, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Unless you're at the point, like Doug was saying, with spirit, where you could use the burning ember, if you're okay with your spirit, which was going to be the intelligence and increased critical effect. Am I correct? Is what that one
Sounds
was?
right.
Yeah, plus crit, plus 3% crit. Yep. And then we have glyphs for discipline. Really, I think this is sort of misspelled. I think it's supposed to be for Reforge, which is spirit, then mastery, then crit. Holy, it's spirit, then haste, then mastery. That's probably stat priority instead of glyphs. So for disc glyphs, Holy Fire, Penance, and Power Word Shield. Does that sound about right?
Definitely penance. So penance allows you to cast penance while you're moving. Otherwise, you have to be stationary.
And it's a waste of spell if you have to move. Yeah.
Right. So I think always penance, and then I think things get a little situational depending on the nature of the fight. So I think you do need to be prepared to be flexible and swap stuff out depending on if you're atonement healing or if you need to focus on single target or shielding. I mean, there's a lot of versatility, I think. I'm actually running with Holy Fire, which increases the range of some of my DPS spells, so I don't have to get so close to the boss to atonement. And then
that's the same one I use as well with the penance.
And then I've got Power Word Shield, which actually converts some of my shields to healing. So 20% of my shield absorb goes to healing. But there's many other good choices.
Yeah, agreed. I have the same things he does. So.
Okay, next up for Holy Glyphs, Light Spring, Light Well, Holy Nova, or Renew.
I would agree with that. Because, like we mentioned, the biggest flaw that the Holy Priest used to have with the Light Well is nobody ever clicked it. The Light Spring automatically will heal players when they're in need of it. And so the one makes it a Light Spring, and the other one increases the charges that it has, I believe. And the third one, Holy Nova or Renew, that's situational, whichever you prefer to use, along those lines. Yeah,
all right.
Which is why they'll say, boy, your healing is terrible as a holy. You used to hear that all the time.
The low well, nice. And so our next slide is sort of just talking about gems in particular. We previously talked about gems in respect to just the general gems that are out there, but again, the combination we're looking at here for disc would be Spirit Crit, then Spirit Mastery.
And again, as you saw in Mr. Robot, it could be a haste build. It depends on what your preference is, really.
I mean, for me personally, I actually am often... I don't tend to focus on mastery at all. So I am... it's either crit or haste above mastery for me. And right now, what I'm playing around with is essentially equal weight for crit and haste, but always above mastery.
Okay. And then for Holy, we're looking at Spirit Haste, then Spirit Mastery, and it says more haste means more ticks on Renew, and Holy Word Sanctuary and Divine Hymn.
That, I believe, is absolutely correct on the haste one, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So buffs. So what buffs should we always keep up? So the slide says Inner Fire, except when you need Inner Will. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Again, that's situational. If you're having mana problems, Inner Will may be your better choice because it's going to reduce the... Doesn't it reduce the cast of...
mana of instant cast
Yes, yeah.
spells. Most of our big heals are not instant cast, though.
Yeah.
By and large, you're going to run with Inner Fire and take that 10% spell power.
That's what I do. 100%
it's really the default, and in 90% of the cases, probably what you'd use.
Okay, so next up, Power Word Shield, and basically this is sort of just a word of caution if you have groups of more than one priest, is that basically Power Word Shield is more redundant, can be redundant if you have more than one priest there, because you need to coordinate your shields, because you really can't double shield somebody. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's really annoying. I hope they fix that eventually.
Yeah. So next couple slides are just sort of our notes from our other priest in the guild who couldn't make it today, but from Melodious's notes, she says she doesn't have a set rotation, which sounds about the same for each of you. That there really is no set rotation for heals or damage, but she has a priority system for her spells, shields, and shells that she uses, and that depends upon her healing assignment, the raid composition, experience and gear of others in the group, whether it's trash versus boss fights in dungeons, raids, LFRs, and whether it's a guild run. So those are some different things that she thinks about whenever she's looking at how should she go ahead and heal a specific tank or a specific run that's out there. And that sounds about the same for what you guys are doing as well.
Yeah.
I'd agree.
So next up, she says there's no true rotation for priests. In her opinion, to be an effective healer, you need to be aware of your talents, glyphs, spells, shields, buffs, and gear, and then what they do, how do they help the priests, but also others in the group. What do I need to do? What do I need to monitor the most? In other words, as a healer, what does she need to monitor the most? Which spell shield combination are the most effective for specific situations? And she says she always carries about 5 to 8 tomes, so she can adjust her talents and glyphs as needed. And the other thing is, she says that knowing your tune and situation awareness goes a really long way to being a really good healer. Do you guys concur?
That last line,
Absolutely,
is 100% right there. Knowing who's going to need the heals again, that type of thing.
So knowing your group, yep.
Yep, exactly.
And that's one of the benefits of running. Like I said, I mean, I can say that in all honesty, as a tank, I look at the same thing here, something very similar, because I get to know as I run with people over and over and over again, I get a feel for, okay, this is whenever Jabber takes aggro, or this is whenever someone else in the group will take aggro, and so I know this is what I need to make sure I have a taunt ready at this point, or this is when the ads drop, so I need to make sure I grab aggro off those. So basically, this is what she says for a rough rotation for helping with the raid. So, Powered Shield the tank, Prayer of Mending on the raid, and then go back to the tank.
That's pretty basic right there, yep.
She said these are always your go-to spells. Penance on the boss, because she does Atonement healing. So builds Evangelism. Holy Fire on the boss, builds Evangelism. 4 smites to get your 5 stack of Evangelism. Trigger Archangel, and then hit Archangel to consume the stacks of Evangelism and increase the healing by 5% up to 25%. Mm-hmm. So those are what she's saying the go-to is for her Disc Priest.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And then she says, depending on what's needed, can pop Powered Infusion, Holy Fire, spam Smite until Holy Fire is available. Do it again when Powered Infusion is there again.
Yep, that's for the Atonement, and again, you can do it in the reverse effect, where I said, like, for the AoE if you want, if you're doing less of the Atonement, and there's going to be you want a lot of defensive shields on everybody, you could do the Powered Infusion, Spirit Shell, and Prayer of Healing.
That is tremendously effective if you know a big hit is coming.
Yes,
it can make a huge difference. It's very effective if you have the timing down right.
Yes, if you have the timing down right, I've seen the Guardians go off, and if you time it right, people literally almost take no damage if you prep for it. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna start wrapping up here. I don't think we're gonna be able to get through. Well, we might be able to. So basically, what we have here, she says, depending if everyone is okay, she says Powered Shield on the tank, then Prayer of Mending, so it jumps 5 times, and possibly Penance on the boss or the tank, depending on where their health is at. If you're on AoE damage on the raid, she says after Archangel, Spirit Shell with a spamming while spamming Prayer of Healing to intensify the Absorb for 15 seconds. And then all healing transferred into stronger absorb shields.
Yeah, that's what I just mentioned. Yep.
And then she says, throw in Cascade, Divine Star, if everyone's grouped, Holy Nova if everyone's spread out. So Cascade spread out and Holy Nova is spread out. Then basically every I jumped a little bit here. Then every second or third time going into Holy Fire rotation, Archangel should be available. If you're following that sort of general.
Yeah, it's a pretty short cooldown.
It is. I rotate between the Atonement healing with the mixed AoE healing, shielding, that type of thing.
Okay. And then she says, switch based on radar boss. She said, possibly switch to holy for diversity, shield, or communication. And then basically she says, Shadow Priest always help with the Cascade, Holy Nova, and Divine Star for last talent. What's very critical for this is being willing to hit Hymn of Hope for mana regen, which needs to be coordinated with everybody else. We've sort of said that multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
We also talked about making sure that you know the fight well enough so you know when the lull is, so you can know whenever you can pop your mana regen, so you can get that 7.75 seconds to 8 seconds. And then also, obviously, communicating with other healers to watch specific people. So again, that's touch on what we talked about the healing team. And her big takeaways were for the healing team is to coordinate and communicate cooldowns. Be ready to help and announce when you're healing. Do not duplicate, so minimize overhealing, minimize wasted clicks if people are already shielded. You will need to move and heal, so practice.
Yep. Do not duplicate goes right into the whole thing with the spells as well. So it's a wasted click sometimes if you're not communicating that.
Okay, so in probably about the next 5 minutes, we're going to run through Mogu'Shan vaults real quick. So everyone ready?
Oh.
Oh,
Sure.
okay.
Okay, Stone Guard for Disc Priest. So it says, getting ready to overload a few seconds before, try Powered Infusion. Spirit Shell, Prayer of Healing, and Cascade, roughly. Do you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, for Fang. Again, this is coming from a Disc Priest perspective because we have quite a bit of Disc Priests in our group. Smite Atonement from center. If Nullification Barrier is ready, Cascade, Basic Prayer of Mending. No barriers up, then Healer alternate big cooldowns.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then she says Powered Barrier is basically whenever we're in the center, everyone's in the center during the epicenter. Pop the Powered Barrier if the Nullification Barrier is not ready, and then Prayer of Healing on everyone as well.
As long as someone else is not hitting one of their big cooldowns. Exactly, yeah.
All right, Garajal. Stacking people up. Make sure everyone is stacked so you can do AOE, more effective AOE healing. The priest will have Powered Shield on anyone with Voodoo Dolls, and Prayer of Healing fast smite rotation on Powered Infusion. Up to 75% Cascade penance, doing a Prayer of Mending ASAP below every bit of mana. She says really focus on mana regen because of the totems and moving back and forth. She says if you're a holy, getting Renew, Holy Word Sanctuary, if stacked, you can go ahead and Cascade. Powered Infusion, do Flash Heal, Holy Divine Hymn, Holy Word Sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's that fight with everyone jumping in and out of the
and
realm.
emphasize again blowing your mana on that fight because you get it all back. It's and the important thing is again communication. The DPS letting you know, oh, I'm healed up. Okay, then you can know you switch to the next one. Very critical.
Okay, next up is Spirit Kings. So we have 4 bosses, Kwang, Subutai, Meng, and Zan, who alternate in order. The key here is stacking. Basically, watch out for Annihilate. It might be better to have 2 people to separate from the group, those that are not the most movement, the ones that aren't best at movement.
Or having lag issues.
Or having lag issues, yep. Lots of AoE healing, massive attack. Then behind the boss, watch out for flanking and keeping everyone stacked.
Real quick, that's another great time to use Leap of Faith if somebody is having an issue where they're not getting out of the flanking. Perfect example when to use Leap of Faith right there, too.
Okay. So next one up is Elegon. Split into 2 groups, 2 healers, side where the off-tank will be before the total annihilation. Keep stacks below 10, AoE heal, Spirit Shell, Power Word Sanctuary, areas to stack. You're sort of coordinating all that. Coordinating with other healers. And orbs. Tank needs to be with healers.
Otherwise, the healers get eaten.
All right, Will of the Emperor. So we're wrapping up here. We're basically wrapping up here.
This one, real quick, I want to mention. We learned with our healers, we did no healing whatsoever until the bosses came down. And I know that may sound strange to people out there, but reason being is we didn't build any aggro and the bosses weren't going after the healers, and it made it easier for the tanks to kite them back to their positions. It was really raid awareness situation, the void tendrils, the psych fiend, whatever. Keeping those ads from touching the DPS was really what made the difference for us in that fight.
Okay. And because of that, our strategy, it was, again, trying not to do any healing, which was exactly what Z just said. We also used a lot of void tendrils and the psych fiends. The other thing was stack towards a center point. Keep the tanks up until Titan gas phase. Coordinate big heals and barriers. Focus on tanks as well as heals during Titan gas. Smiting Atonement on the bosses. Switch from tank to tank, watching the whole heal group. Low on mana after Titan gas is a good time to do Hymn of Hope. Let DPS know that you have rage on you.
Yep.
And DPS should be responding.
Immediately. To get it off you.
The get it off work as well. Next one up we have is Jinrock. Jinrock is stay near the tanks during the pulls for those healers that are healing the tanks. Everyone takes AoE damage. All healers need to help. Focus Lightning need to communicate about coverage. So whenever one person runs away, they need to go ahead and make sure they're covered. When a person gets back, need to help the raid, get the raid health back. Alternate cooldowns during Lightning Storm.
Yep.
All right, and then last but not least is just overall discussion with the raid. Is every class has some form of damage mitigation. Need to do whatever you can. And basically what it is, when you get into these raids, you need to do whatever you can to mitigate it. Priests have pain suppressions as well. We talked a little about that earlier. Also, things to remember is you do have healing potions. If you don't, you need to ask your local alchemist. Also, always good to have a warlock around, or at least a warlock alt, so they can go ahead and distribute lack candy prior to the fight and throughout the fight. So you also need to be aware of the other classes and what the other classes can do, and probably that.
So just one, you mentioned warlocks, and as a healer, knowing you have warlocks is really important, because if they, was it spirit tap?
Life tap.
Life tap.
Yep.
Can be really maddening as a healer, because all you see, if you're not paying attention, is the warlock's health bars getting low, and so you heal them, and essentially all you're doing is transferring your mana over to them. And so you really need to communicate with the warlocks if they are doing that a bit in the fight, to know if they're okay, or if they're getting hit, or they're just getting their mana pool back up.
Yeah, the good warlocks will let you know, I'm going to be life tapping to get some mana. Mm-hmm. That way you know immediately why they're doing it.
Well, exactly. I think one of the big things that definitely has come across this entire discussion for me, as we're sort of wrapping up here, is that communication is key, and the big points are basically looking at communication, at knowing your class, knowing what you can do and how you can help out, and the other thing about it is really knowing the fights as well. So I think that's sort of the big things that have come out through this. I want to thank both of you guys for helping us out with the Priest Heals, and Kay for being our producer in the background. And I'll go ahead and take some time. You guys have turned over you guys for final comments. So we'll start with Z.
I think we pretty much touched on everything again. The biggest thing I'm going to say again is the communication, raid awareness, knowing when things are going to happen, when they're not, when your lulls are going to be, and working together as a team effectively. I mean, because we've done bosses even with people who have lower DPS, and it still works out. It really does. It's a game. Have fun. Enjoy it. And if you guys have any questions, don't ever hesitate to ask.
All right, Hemotao?
So I would say it is a lot of fun, and it can sound daunting. I don't want people to come away from this conversation thinking, oh my gosh, this is really complicated. It is a lot of fun, and particularly if you're able to run with your guild group or a bunch of friends, and they can sort of support you in your learning curve. I'd encourage you to try it. There's always a need for healers. You'll always find a group, no matter where you go, and it's very dynamic. So it's not boring at all.
All right, next up will be myself. And so my last parting comments is this. The other thing about it is, guys, you're in a guild. The easiest way to start healing and get more comfortable healing is to get some guildies together and go ahead and start doing that. So we're all here to help support one another. So we'll see you guys in game. And with that, we'll go ahead and we'll sign off. So thank you for watching. Goodbye.